Police Spies Out of Lives is a campaign set up by family and supporters of 8 women deceived into intimate relationships by undercover Metropolitan Police officers and ACPO. Police Spies Out of Lives is supporting the legal case by these 8 women who have chosen to remain anonymous. The women believe the actions of the Metropolitan Police breach their human rights, subjecting them to inhumane and degrading treatment and disrespecting their private and family life.
Police spies! 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 Police spies!
On Tuesday, 18th of March 2014, Unveil magazine joined campaigner and spokesperson for Women Against Rape, Lisa Longstaff, at the picketing outside Royal Courts of Justice, which saw the preliminary hearing of the case begin, which has taken 2 years to get to court. A month later, Unveil catches up with Lisa to find out how Women Against Rape have been vocal in the campaign and whether the police will be made accountable for their actions.
Hi, my name is Lisa Longstaff and I'm from Women Against Rape. Well, we decided to support it because we were horrified when we found out what had happened to these women, in that, they were movement activists on the left. They had, in some cases, been trying to hold the state to account for abuses that it had made, like in the libel campaign, and also multinational companies. And some of us have been involved in that kind of activism, before. And when we found out what had happened to the women, in that they had had long-term relationships with men who posed undercover as fellow activists who they thought they could trust, they were taken advantage in a very disgusting way, in a repulsive way, because they basically slept with these men and had, intimate, close relationships with them for sometimes a number of years, and some of them even had children with the men. And then they only much later found out that they were actually working for the police. And that meant that the whole relationship and the production of children was a trick and done under false pretenses. And if the women had known that they were working for the police, number one, they wouldn't have allowed their organisation to be undermined in that way, and information to be gathered under those pretenses, and also they would not have had those intimate relationships. And we felt it was a kind of rape, and certainly, at the very least, it has to be described as abusive. And so we felt we wanted to support the women in the action that they took to try and get some legal recognition that it was an abuse of power by the state against people who were vulnerable. We attended a vigil that they called outside the court at one of the hearings, the most recent hearing. And while we took our banner and made it clear that our organisation was supporting the case, we also publicised the vigil and encouraged people in our network to attend. We took our banner, we took our placards and so on. We spoke to the media and other people who were there, and we subsequently responded to a request for the public to give evidence to a Home Office inquiry into the regulation of investigatory powers, and we submitted evidence to that, giving our experience and our demands in a short, summarised way about what we thought should happen. the main sort of message of which, or the main demand of which, was that that the authorities have to either take responsibility for sending these men in as undercover spies and take responsibility for everything they did and the consequences of their actions, or they have to publicly dissociate from them, and those men, you know, need to be prosecuted for an abuse of power. And either way, you know, what happened to the women has to be publicly acknowledged and apologies made. They have to be compensated for it, because it, you know, we do think it's an abuse of state power, what they've done. Well, I think it's very important that they're bringing this case, because it does put the another public spotlight on the operations that the police have carried out. They're the same unit that spied on the Stephen Lawrence family and were placed into many grassroots, particularly anti-racist organisations, particularly left of centre organisations. And I think it's important to bring legal cases like this, because it's one way of not only publicising what's gone on, but trying to hold institutions to account, you know, by using the legal system. I think that what's been revealed with, you know, campaigns like Hillsborough, the Hillsborough families, where they've been pressing for just even for basic truth to be revealed to them, and acknowledged that the corruption that went on after the Hillsborough disaster, where the police changed statements by officers and by others, and where it was clear that fans and families were blamed for the deaths of fans who died as a result of institutional negligence rather than violence by, you know, people that they were with. I think that those are very big learning lessons. We need to pay attention to all those big campaigns, because they all strengthen each other. And in terms of what's been happening with rape and domestic violence, we are seeing quite similar behaviour in that, you know, police whistleblowers like PC Patrick, who gave evidence to a select committee in the House of Commons shortly before Christmas, actually confirmed what we had suspected was widespread tampering with women's reports of rape, pressure to withdraw reports of rape, not recording reports properly, which distorts the crime figures. I mean, in his evidence, he said that up to 25% of reports of rape were wrongly recorded and may never have got into the crime statistics. And we have for 7 years been campaigning against the practice of women being prosecuted for making false allegations of rape, because we were very concerned, having met some of those women who were prosecuted and others who were fighting prosecution and you know, managed not to be prosecuted. We were very aware that in some cases women who had been raped were facing criminalisation for lying, when in fact they were raped, and you know, there was a negligent investigation, or the police turned on the women for under some other pretext and tried to prosecute them. So we've been opposing that, because that's one of the major backlashes that women reporting rape have been facing, is that, you know, in a nutshell, you report a crime of violence and you end up being the suspect, which is what happened to the Lawrence family, you know, and a number of others. Similarly, we've been working with the English Collective of Prostitutes and a number of other groups in a Safety First coalition, which was set up by the English Collective after 5 sex workers were murdered in Ipswich a few years ago, to call for the decriminalisation of sex work, because our experience of working with sex workers who've been raped is that in many cases women are being criminalised for work that they're doing, which they consent to, some of which may border on illegality, minor illegalities, and we object to the fact that that minor illegality is being prioritised for prosecution over reports of violence, including rape, that they are reporting. So we have been campaigning for the decriminalisation of sex work rather than the increased criminalisation that's been called for by successive governments and backed by feminists and church groups and other reactionary groups. In 1995, we helped two sex workers bring the first ever private prosecution for rape in England and Wales, together with the English Collective of Prostitutes and Legal Action for Women. We helped these women bring a case to court with barristers who worked for free on the case, and we had to bring it privately because the state refused to prosecute the man who raped these two sex workers, and using the same evidence that had been refused by the Crown Prosecution Service, the man was convicted and found guilty and given an 11-year sentence in prison. And then it turned out that he had actually attacked other vulnerable people as well, other vulnerable women in the past. So I think that the police spies case is another important step in holding the state to account for abuse, and in this case particularly pernicious abuse. The key problem for us is that the authorities who are in charge of those officers never properly hold them to account, and we think that while that happens, nothing's going to change. There are institutions, there are a number of institutions, and there is a management structure which should be disciplining behaviour that is against the law. And unfortunately, we can't rely on any of those procedures because the internal disciplinary measures are way too weak and do not at all in any way reflect the damage caused to victims when, for example, police lose evidence in a rape case. Victims of rape suffer for years and years, and sometimes a lifetime, or even take their own life when they can't get justice. And it's derisory, some of the disciplinary measures, if the complaint is ever upheld, the disciplinary measures are very, very minor and of no import compared to the pain and suffering of the victim. And even where an outside body, a so-called independent body, looks at the complaint, they're very like the Independent Police Complaints Commission. As with deaths in custody and other complaints that are made against the police, they are, first of all, very rarely even investigated because most of them are shunted back to the police to investigate internally. And where they are investigated by the IPCC, a lot of the reports that have come out have totally discredited their organisation, because unless you have independent, verifiable video or other recorded evidence proving your case, the public's word is never upheld over a police officer's word. As an organisation, we have to support women who are being raped, beaten, killed, really, badly abused, who call on the police for help when there's an emergency situation with a violent man. We don't have the luxury to bypass them because our job is to try to help them get the protection and justice that they need. And at the moment, that is the system we have. So we have set out to try to make that system work better for the women who are our constituency and who who we feel we represent. The police and the Crown Prosecution Service and the courts are institutions of the establishment which are there to administer justice, and as such we feel strongly that we want to demand that they give us justice instead of persecuting us or our communities and families.